Hey guys, Freaky Finance here. Last week we looked at Dario Health, and this week we're gonna do something a little bit different. Mainly because we got earnings coming up, so I wanted to try to do like a quarterly review. It's not really a review though, it's more of just thoughts. And specifically I want to talk about ARK because I've got a few messages now saying look at this slide deck for their big ideas for 2021. So I wanted to go through not really all of it because it's too much for me to go through, but just parts of it. So what I did after I read the Big Ideas PDF file is I wanted to see exactly what they're holding. Well, in 4 of their ETFs anyway, just the top 30 holdings. Most of these ETFs that ARK has about 50 holdings, and just to see kind of how they're weighted and what they're in. And then what I quickly did is I went through each of them real quick just to see which ones looked interesting or new to me. And what I'm going to try to do is put these into my rotation of videos as they come along. One of the things that's nice about ARK is that they post everything. It's all very transparent. Like the research is even transparent and free, right? So it's kind of nice. So anyway, and we're going to talk about CRISPR today, mainly because I just bought it this week and it's on the top of my head. But really, I spent this week kind of going through most of these just like real quick, like 5 minutes, which ones I'm interested in. I circled the ones that I'm probably going to be looking at. So CRISPR's up there. We'll talk about that in a second. Invitae's up there. Really, that's a genetic testing play. Unity Software, that's a gaming play. Thinking game purchases are just going to continue to take off, and that's an easy developer way. And they're kind of owning the development market, especially for indie games and cheaper games that can go the masses. Think like Among Us is probably the best example. And they're also targeting schools and developing schools, so they're going to learn how to develop games and platforms using Unity Software at their post-secondary, and I think that just further cements their status in the world of game development, and I think that industry is just going to continue to grow as it has. I'd say that's the main ETF holdings. The ARK, ARKK. The genomic one is probably the most interesting for me, just because I'm a bit of a bio geek on the side, not just a finance geek, so I thought some of these were pretty interesting, specifically Twist and Pacific Bio, but there's some smaller positions down here, Berkeley and Beam, that also look pretty interesting. Some of these you're going to see overlap with the ARK holdings. So ARK is kind of the collective innovation big fund, and then you have these kind of themed ETFs that ARK has. So you have their genomic fund, their autonomous robot fund, then their fintech fund, and I think they had quite a few ones. They had a 3D printer one, which was pretty neat too. But so anyway, those are the ones that I'm looking for on the genomic side. And then on the autonomous robot side, you got Trimble. I'm surprised Baidu's up there. People call Baidu the Google China. So I'm going to look at that as well, like Baidu and Pinduoduo. And again, that kind of goes back to my initial theme thinking for at the beginning of 2021 was China tech, right? I think we're going to see tech both in America and China continue to accelerate, mainly because of the competition between the two. It's just going to continue to heat up. And I think that's going to be good competition for technology. But yeah, we'll have to see how it plays out. But anyway, Trimble looked interesting as well. And then you have Kratos Defense and Security. So one of the things that hasn't stopped innovating is military, right? The ways to affect other, and it, not only now, like we're developing technology, not just lethal force, but just incapacitate and overwhelm. There's different ways to win wars now. But anyway, Kratos looked interesting to me. Paradigm looked really interesting on the robotic side. What else? They got Lockheed. So if you wanted some type of hedge, I kind of view Kratos and Lockheed as ways to play like a China, US, if it actually does escalate enough. Like most of them will be an arms race, and an arms race, even if it doesn't lead to real conflict over Taiwan, should continue to see increased spending on both sides, right? So those two would also be a way to participate in that fintech innovation. So really they're targeting digital wallets. That's their theme for fintech for ARK. A couple of these look pretty interesting to me. Adian's up there. Yika, it's also a pretty interesting company. Yika actually tried to buy, but didn't get filled. So it's kind of weird. I think part of it's in the gray market, but I'm probably going to put an order in again. But they're very interesting fintech plays. Yika has quite a lot of market share in China for transactions, and it's not as well known as the other ones. So I thought that was very interesting. It's not very liquid, but it's pretty interesting. And then Pinduoduo, which I also think is growing, is very interesting. The platform, right? You kind of have like a Costco and then a group buying atmosphere, like a social Costco, if that makes sense. I'm not really doing justice to any of these ideas because I'm going through them so quickly, and because I haven't talked through them enough. But I like that app as well, and it's all mobile, and they're I think they're doing more than $2 billion in sales, and they're growing. I don't know. I think that was like 100% year over year or something like that. So anyway, a lot of growth in China tech. So that's where my eyes are going. And a lot of these ideas on ARK are obviously super volatile, but they also don't correlate too much with my other positions. So, and I also don't own that many of these type of things because my background is more finance and traditional valuation, right? None of these have, well, I shouldn't say, a lot of these don't have earnings, right? A lot of these are very 5 years out and 10 years out even. So that makes your traditional valuation metrics very hard to do. But some of these are big displacement ideas. And I haven't seen like ideas like this that are actually starting to come at us constantly ever. To be fair, I'm only 33. But there's a lot of innovation coming, and a lot of it could change fintech. Healthcare is going to change quite a bit. We're going to go through that real quick here. That was my little preamble, but that's kind of where my head's at. And I didn't want to dig into too many numbers today because I got a lot of earnings to go through next week. So, oncology trials. This is on the ARK big investment slide deck. It's near the end, so slide 108 of 112. And basically, there's an autologous and allogenic. And all you really need to know is that allogenic cells, I would just say donated, or the real word might be foreign cells, whereas autologous cells modifies from the patient's own cells. So autologous basically means that the risk of cell rejection is low because it's your own cells. Whereas allogenic, it's not your own cells. Allogenic are cells that are relatively cheaper because they scale. Product consistency, because they're kind of almost mass produced, that's how I view it. And ability to redose. So they have quite a lot of pros for allogenic, right? That brings the cost down, which makes the whole idea of actually executing on it available to investors like me, right? But as the con is that you have a risk of cell rejection with allogenic, right? Because it's not technically your own body cell. It's something foreign, and your body will attack foreign things if it can identify it. I thought this ARK slide was very good because you can see approved therapies, 100% all autologous, right? Because there's no risk of cell rejection, but now we're starting to see quite a lot depleted, 60%, 40%. You can see allogenic taking share, and that's because of the cost profile and the scalability, right? And if you can mitigate this main con of cell rejection, you're pretty much in the clear. You actually have a product that people can afford, and that cost just continues to come down each year. And Kathy talked about that quite a bit on the Big Ideas podcast or webcast. So this was interesting to me, is the cancer side, the oncology side, and really this chart here, this grid, really just says we're moving from 13 billion currently addressable by cell therapy, which is late stage liquid tumors, and we're moving up solid, and we're moving to early, so we can catch it earlier and we can catch it in solid state. So very interesting, and that market is materially larger. And then the next slide that I thought was very interesting is this one as well for ex vivo and in vivo. So ex vivo modifies the patient's cells outside the body and then translates them back into the patient, whereas in vivo modifies the patient cells inside the body directly, so they don't have to take it out and put it back in. And again, you get when you don't have to take the cells out and put it back in, you cut down costs, right? And you get more consistent because there's less chance of error in taking it out and putting it back in. To be fair though, you want to make sure that it works because there's no taking it out, looking at it, making sure, and then putting it back in. So there's always pros and cons, right? But you can see which one's winning out. So both are doing well, but you can see in vivo starting to show up, mainly because cost is lower and it's more scalable. So and those two things are correlated. So why am I bringing that up? And why I bought CRISPR, so I'll show that. So I just bought this at 118, and most things in the space are in ARK space are very volatile, so I don't own very many things like CRISPR, and you can't truly value this traditionally, right? Like, is $9 billion market cap expensive? Not necessarily, right? If this company can do what it looks like it's starting to be able to do, this could be very large, and it could displace traditional healthcare and how we handle diseases. So that's not an understatement. It's not. I'm not that kind of guy. Basically, what CRISPR does, and there's so many videos because this stock kind of got hyped, right? Most people are following Kathy now. That's probably why people sent me the PDF to look at it. And so their ideas get hyped, and what that means is there's technically it'll move even more volatile, so it'll go up higher than it ever should, and it'll go down more than it ever should. That's really what will happen. And so my 118 entry isn't perfect, but I don't expect it to be perfect, so I didn't put that much in. Like, this thing was $50 before it started really taking off, And I mean, now it's at 118 and I have more information, right? So, and it was just at 220. When was that? It was just at 220 January 15th, and today is April 17th. So 3 months later, you're down $100 a share, right? That's quite a drop from the hype. Though the science hasn't changed at all. If anything, we're just getting more and more information, which is actually helpful. So basically, CRISPR, like the tool that that most forward-looking protocols are going to look at for genomic therapy. And basically, you just identify and cut out the part that you don't want. Think of like scissors, I guess. And then you put in the part that you want. And it also, and then usually DNA will repair itself anyway, right? And that's kind of what they're doing here. Cut out the part you don't want, put in the part you want. Here is their pipeline. The farthest along are the hemoglobin ones. Those are the easier ones to tackle for this, for most things, because you can see it very easily and you can see the effect very easily. And I'm going to show you that in the next slide, which is pretty cool. So they're not phase 3 yet, but I mean, phase 2 is not bad for this type of stuff. And there hasn't been any adverse reactions yet, though the sample size is small. And then you see Oncology coming up there as well. And importantly, you're going to notice they're all allogenic, right? And if we go back to that slide, you can see allogenic is the scalable, lower cost option that we're starting to see, right? So that makes the treatment more affordable. All right, and then you also got diabetes down there. They're just starting IND, so they haven't started clinical yet. Say in phase 1, phase 2 in 2021, and they got a partner already for that one, which you would, because that would be a big, another big TAM, right? You can see these indications are very all over the place, and it's the same science, which is very cool. And I'm going to talk about that in a second. Like having different drugs that target different things. This is the same tool over and over again. Obviously identifying different parts of the genome and then cutting them out and putting in what you want, right? And I think if it's successful for this, it should in theory be successful for other things. Not necessarily all things, but we'll see. Beta thalassemia is a blood disorder that reduces the production of hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is just really how blood cells carry oxygen around the body. That's what those levels mean. Other thing that's interesting is here you can see the statistical significance. Well, we don't measure it here, but you can just see like this chart is very good. Hemoglobin fractionation, so basically this little blue bar, light blue, you can see it going from 0.3, just steadily increasing. The x-axis here is months, so 1 month, 2 month, 3 month, and really by month 4, you just look at the difference, right? You got 10.5 versus 0.3 in 4 months. The sample size, I should point out here, is very small. So you got 7 initially, then all of a sudden you only got 5, and you got 2. And this is a year and a half later. So the sample size, ideally, you want to get that up. But it looks, for my purposes, it looks pretty good, right? And for the people's lives that this affects, right? Because you would need a blood transfusion every so often otherwise, right? And you can see that here, duration of transfusion independence after the surgery, or the treatment rather. Wow, 20 months. It's pretty crazy. So very exciting. And obviously for people that have that type of disease, not having to get a blood transfusion, which are not cheap, well, in most places, is huge. Not only from a financial perspective, but from an actual well-being, life perspective. So very cool. And so unlike buying into an idea, this is actually starting to execute. And the science, they did win the Nobel Prize, Emmanuel and Jennifer, for CRISPR. So it is a big deal, and it's proven in the scientific community as a big deal. So it's not some hype. Well, it is hyped, but it's not hyped for no reason, I guess is the better way to word it. So far, the technology is targeting the diseases, right, and removing them from the genome. Cancer, how my brain translates it, is really just cells reproducing too quickly. That's how my brain works it. Cells are just morphing into more and more cells too quickly before they can develop, and it leads to tumors, and the cells don't specialize. So that's what this says right here. Then I just view specialization as, say, like a career. So like say some people are firefighters, some people are policemen. It's the same kind of thing in itself. Like there's a specialization. That's kind of just how I view it. And then the cancer cells don't repair themselves or die. They literally just reproduce and keep reproducing too quickly. So one of the things I want to talk about is why I think this is bigger than that slide deck of just those indications. These, don't get me wrong, they're kind of everywhere. They got cystic fibrosis down here as well, but that's only, 10 indications on this slide with the science. And importantly, these 4 down here, which are just research, so very early, whereas here we have some results now, right? But here you can see in vivo approaches, and we've talked about that on that slide. Again, it's cheaper and you get more consistency. But anyway, back to this slide. I just wanted to show this because this is from the Moderna deck. This is a little bit different but I wanted to show down here, you can see the nucleus, and that's where your DNA is, and that's where your genome is. And basically your DNA is the blueprint that makes your cells do things, and it usually creates proteins. So in this example, it has some good stuff, but obviously it's Moderna, so it's different, because Moderna is basically sending messenger RNA into your cell, and it's bypassing the nucleus, so it doesn't have to process the RNA. The RNA is going to the ribosome, going directly to the Golgi apparatus and executing the instruction, which is to create a protein, right? And this one isn't the COVID protein, but it's the same idea. But I just like this visual. This is very cool, right? And that's kind of how we've done medicine, is by getting the proteins. So in this case, we're trying to get a protein out that looks like a virus, so your cell has, or your body has an immune response to it. That's the whole point of the COVID vaccine. That's the whole point of a lot of Moderna's vaccines, is to fake a protein to get an immune response or some type of response from the body. Now, you don't need to do that for CRISPR. So CRISPR is totally different because the nucleus itself creates the blueprint. So the thing with diseases is that a lot of diseases create proteins that are not desirable, and these proteins will make your body do certain things or not do certain things. And so what CRISPR can do is go right into the DNA of the genome and change the instructions so that those proteins never come out, those mutations. And to understand the scale of that, I wanted to put this here, that proteins are the most targeted thing, or at least one of the most targeted things in modern science for treatment. So most medicines treat the protein, not the person, if that makes sense. And the protein is derived from the DNA. So by going right to the source, which is the DNA genome, they can remove the protein from ever being created, and therefore remove the problem at source instead of kind of reacting to the problem, if that makes sense. But here is just another chart showing just how many molecular targets of FDA approved drugs target proteins. So you got human proteins, pathogen proteins. That's a lot of indications, right? Like that slide only had 10. We could be looking at a material amount. This one says 667 human genome derived proteins, which technically CRISPR should be able to look at. So that's what I mean when I say that I don't think we're able to process what this science really could mean on the disease front in humans. And I think for humanity, this is a bigger deal than $9 billion in market cap. And again, I was just really Googling random research articles, just trying to see, okay, how many drugs actually target proteins, and the vast majority of targets of drugs are protein. And you can see that most of them have the same science behind it. Druggable protein is one that possesses folds that favor interactions with small drug-like molecules. But yeah, I kind of wanted to go through that today. It's a little bit heavier on the bio side, but I want to get that innovation and that excitement, because I think this could be big, right? And it's not just a hype. Like, I see all the YouTube videos on CRISPR, and a lot of them are just pumping the stock, really. But this could be big, and I think it will be good for the world. But yeah, I'd like to know your thoughts also on this slide. If you guys actually have one of these that you want me to look at, feel free to let me know. There's quite a lot. I only took the top 30, so if you want, you can go to their website and look at the ETF. There'll be 50. These are the top weighted 30 in each of them as of April 13th. Overall, pretty interesting stuff here on ARK's plate. And that research report, thanks for sending that, because that was very informative. But yeah, I'd like to know your thoughts on innovation, and have a great rest of your week.